Hello, everybody, and welcome to scavengerlife.com. If you don't recognize the voice, that's because I am not Jay, and I am not Ryan. I am J.L. Collins of J.L. Collins NH, and for this episode, I have hijacked their podcast, and we're going to turn the tables on them. And instead of them interviewing me, which they did about a week ago, I'm going to get to interview them, and that's because when they were interviewing me, which was a lot of fun, I kept thinking about all the things I wanted to ask them because they're such cool and interesting people. So just real quickly, I write a blog. It's jlcollinsnh.com, and I talk mostly about investing and money and life and sometimes travel and whatever else strikes my fancy. And a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month now, I noticed that I was getting a flow of readers from a website I'd never heard of called scavengerlife.com. And I got kind of curious and I clicked over and I found a podcast that mentioned FU money. And I have a post about FU money and I'm listening to this. And sure enough, Jay and Ryan liked the concept of FU money and they had read my post and they were kind enough to give me credit. So that got me listening to them. And not only was it fun to get the credit for my FU money post, but it was great fun listening to them. And you folks who are out there now are probably already listeners, so I'm not telling you anything that you don't know when I say how engaging they are. But I found them engaging. I listened to a couple more of their podcasts, and I reached out to them to thank them for reading my stuff and for taking the time to comment on it. And that thank you led to my offering them an opportunity to write a guest post on my site, which they have done and will be going up shortly. And they interviewed me. So as I say, and that led me to now hijacking their podcast to interview them. So I'm going to start out and get my questions answered. So Jay, Ryan, thank you for letting me hijack your podcast and being willing to sit under the hot lamps and be interrogated.
You're very welcome.
We're super excited about this. This is great. I'm looking forward to what's coming next.
Yeah. I also want to mention you have a lovely radio voice. As I'm listening to you, I'm like,
thank you very much.
You should have your own radio show.
Well, now, if this is a ploy to turn the tables and talk about me, it's going to work just for this moment.
Okay.
Years ago, back in the 90s, I did actually very briefly, when I was living in Cleveland, I was on the radio in a radio station in Cleveland, which was WHK, which was a all business and news station. And I was doing a short business segment for them once a week. And then I wound up guest hosting every now and again for their talk show hosts when they wanted to take time off. But that's the only radio experience I have. And this is the first, I've been a guest on podcasts, but this is the first time I get to ask the questions.
Very good.
Yeah. I think the reason why we like you is that, as you told me it's before, you like to look at things in the harsh light of the sun, just be open and honest about things, and that's, I think, the only way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to be optimistic, and I try to be, but on the other hand, from a practical point of view, it's makes a lot of sense to be willing to look reality straight in the eye,
Yes.
and not flinch from it when it's not always pretty. So let's talk about you. Who are you guys? I mean, where did you come from? And I'm kind of a linear thinking, so let's start at the very beginning, and you can go one at a time. Whoever wants to go first, but where were you born? Where did you grow up?
So I originally grew up in Boston and the suburbs of Boston, both. And both my parents are independent workers. My dad is a contractor / carpenter type person, and my mom is an artist. And like jack of all trades, basically.
That's starting to explain a lot already.
Yes, no, it does. And I didn't really think about it until later in my life. I'm like, oh, that explains exactly why my life has gone in this direction. And so, I grew up there, and I actually went to a vocational technical high school. So that kind of started me on the path of thinking like, being kind of an independent artist or a graphic designer pretty early on, like 14 years old. And so I majored in graphic design. That's what it was. Actually, it was called graphic arts back then in the.
So did you go directly to college from high school?
Yes, I did. I which some people who go to vocational high schools don't need to do at all because they're ready
Right.
to have a well-paying job right out of high school, which I think every high school should be like that, basically. But, I decided to go to art college after that, in Boston. And,
How'd your parents feel about that?
fine, actually.
Really?
I mean, my mom is an artist, so she's like, go for it. That's just, luckily, that's the kind of family that I come from. Pretty creative people. So, that was normal. It was like, yeah, of course you're going to go to art school. So the good thing is I went to it's the only publicly funded art college in the country. It's called Massachusetts College of Art. So tuition was very, very affordable.
And where is that located?
It's in Boston. It's in downtown Boston on Huntington Avenue.
So did you commute from home, or did you live on campus? Or
So my parents got divorced when I was in like third grade, and my dad lived in a house in Boston, in Jamaica Plain, for all the people who know Boston. And that's very close to Mass College of Art. So what I did was I started living in that house for college. So it was like 2 miles from my college. So it was really quite convenient. So I was able to live there. I actually lived there for about 10 years.
you mean lived with your dad for about 10 years?
Yeah.
So 4 years of college and then 6 years after school?
Yes, I actually went to college for 5 years. I like
Okay, so
spread it
5 and
out.
5.
Yeah, I spread it out as long as I possibly could. Because I loved it. I loved going to school.
How did you pay for school?
Well, I had grants and I had mostly loans.
Okay.
So I had, like low interest, like federal loans, which I didn't understand at the time. Like I was like signing papers, like, sure, great, whatever. And I'm still paying it off. I still owe a bunch of money. I'm 36 and I'm like, when am I going to pay this off?
How much?
I still owe about $20,000.
I think that's one of the most reprehensible things about this whole student loan idea is making this money so readily available to young kids who just don't have any concept of what they're taking on.
Yeah,
And,
they don't. They really don't. I mean, that's the thing that I think, and Jay will probably echo this too, where you really don't know what you're signing or anything. So you're just, I mean, luckily I did go to a state college, so it was about $5,000 a year, which is unheard of. It's just like,
Right.
What? So 5 years of college is, very affordable, but with interest over, 20 years, you're paying almost double. So
what were your so you get out of college and you're living in Boston for the next 5 years
Yes.
with your dad, and what were your early jobs?
I at first did a bunch of jobs with nonprofits.
I'm going to stop real quick. I mean, her jobs are very short before
Yes.
she started going independent. So
Yes, I really, so when I was in college, I was really into student government. I was actually the president of student government my last year. So I got to like give the commencement speech at my own graduation and stuff. It was pretty cool.
Wow.
So I was really into I don't want to say government, but like governance. So I like had a job with the Green Party in Massachusetts, and then they didn't have any money, so I had to leave because they couldn't pay me. And then I worked for MassPurg, which is like a really big nonprofit actually the Purgs are big in the United States, and they also were horrible to work for. They do great work, but so I actually finally got a job in my trade, which was a video editor at WGBH in Boston, which is a huge PBS affiliate. It's one of the biggest ones. They produce Nova and Frontline and a bunch of kids' TV shows.
And being a video editor, is that one of the things you studied at the art school?
Yes.
Okay. So that was relating to your degree.
Yeah, I studied video production and performance art. So that was a pretty interesting major. So I became a video an editor for a kids TV show for several years, and it was amazing. But the issue is when you're 23 years old and you're working in television, you quickly kind of figure out that you're not going to move up the ladder very quickly. The people who are the executive producers and the writers, and, you know, they've been there for a long time. They're not just going to be like, you should definitely have your own show. Like that was something that I wanted, you know, I was like writing shows and like having ideas and trying to do these pitches. And I'm just like, this is never going to happen in this environment. And
I think that's true in any large organization, you know?
Yes. That's normal, I think, in, like you said, large especially, I mean, WGBH is a huge, you know, massive organization. So the great thing is, while I was working there, there was this thing that happened before YouTube, where there was a small group of people around the world putting video on the internet through blogs, and we called that video blogging.
Uh-huh.
And that was in early 2004, and that's where I met Jay. We met on a Yahoo Group's email list. The video blogging list. So I started talking to all these people, and I just knew immediately that I had to like quit my job and move to New York and like hang out with Jay all the time.
All right. So let's turn it over to Jay. Jay, when you first came into the world, where in the world was that?
So my family's originally from the DC area, kind of the Maryland side.
Okay.
Capitol Heights, if anyone knows that. And my, most of my relatives were just, like auto mechanics and carpenters and that kind of thing. They had come over from England in the early part of the century. And so my dad was a pretty motivated kind of super dude. And he, he played football.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be an academic. So he put himself through college and graduate school and became a scientist, a cell biologist. So,
wow, and that made him kind of the odd one out in your family.
Yeah, he put himself through school. I mean, he had no example, and he was a very motivated guy. And my mom was kind of the same way. She was in English. She graduated in English Lit and got a master's. So they actually moved to Texas, and that's where they started a family. So I was born in Houston, Texas, with my parents both teaching at college and high school.
So I know we want to talk about you guys, but this is interesting to me about your dad. Have you ever talked to him about what made him step out of the family mold? Or,
sure.
I mean, that's an odd thing to do.
Yeah,
Was it?
Right. I mean, I've asked him this before, and he would just say, he had no example. He just knew that what he saw around him wasn't something he wanted to be involved in. Like he had a sister that had like 6 kids by the time she was like 25, that kind of family.
Wow.
Like working class and just,
I think this is such an interesting subject because I think so many people, and maybe some of our listeners, are living lives, living in places and doing things, work and otherwise, that are very much shaped by where they were born and what their family was like and for better or worse, and with really no conscious thought that they could be doing something different, whether it's what they do for a living or their religious practices or their education levels or where they live in the world.
Yeah. I mean,
and so I think that's a lot of people, and a lot of people look at maybe other lifestyles that appeal to them and say, well, that's not for me because that's not what I see around me. So it's always interesting when somebody like your dad comes along and I'm sure he means no disrespect to his family and what they're doing, but he's able to say, there are other paths and I bet I can follow one.
Yeah. I mean, my dad said growing up, he worked, at construction sites because that's what my family did, and he just said he just did not want to do that. It's hard work. He saw guys, their bodies just hurt by the time they're in their 50s, from all that hard work throughout their whole lives. And he talks about having a couple teachers that really motivated him and believed in him, and helped him in a way his parents couldn't help him because they didn't understand what education was supposed to do. he always tells a story about my grandfather, who's no longer alive. My grandfather had to told him once that he just didn't understand what men did with a briefcase. Like, what did they have in there? You know, like, he would see these men walk around with a briefcase, and he just didn't understand what they would do in their daytime to make a living. He just didn't understand.
It's a mystery. Yeah.
You know, if it wasn't with your hands, he didn't get it.
Yeah.
Where did you wind up going to school? And did you go right out of high school?
Yeah, so, you know, I grew up in Houston. My mom actually taught at a small private Christian school, and so that's where I went to school, K through 12. I went to Texas A&M for college right out of high school, just kind of an extension of high school almost, because that's what I guess I was supposed to do. And I followed kind of my mom's lead and graduated with a BA in English Lit, which I think we have in common.
We do.
Yeah. And
you nerds.
Not because I knew what that was going to do for me. I just love to read. I think I've always been kind of a bit of a dreamer, so I just love to kind of read and escape. And if they wanted to give me a college college thing for that, then that's fine. But
I think my favorite cartoon of all time shows two guys, and they're out in a field of wheat or corn or whatever kind of agricultural field. And they're both up on racks, and they're wearing old clothes, and they've got straw coming out of their shirt sleeves and out of their pants cuff, and they got old hats on, and they're functioning as scarecrows out in this field. And the one guy's saying to the other, "English major, how about you?"
Yep. So, I mean, exactly. So when I got out of college, I mean, I was completely unprepared for the world. I mean, I had no skills. I had no idea what I was supposed to do with these things. So actually in my 20s, I was kind of a wanderer. I was a bit of a vagabond, you know. I loved to travel. I had an old Honda Accord that I sold and bought a ticket to Europe, and I lived over there for a couple of years, just cooking in kitchens. Just, you know, I just wanted to explore and venture, and I had these hazy dreams of being a writer, but I didn't really know how to write. I was lost for a little while.
Well, maybe you were completely prepared for the world. You just hadn't decided what part of the world you wanted to engage with.
Sure.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And so,
So what were you, so you bummed around but eventually you wound up in New York City from what Ryan said.
right. So I worked at, I realized I could work at a TV station, so I worked in TV news, and I started to work at a small TV station in Cincinnati, and then I moved to Atlanta and worked at CNN, and I worked as a writer, and then I ended up in New York, working for another TV station there. And like she says, that was a time when the internet was starting to kind of happen, and I realized that video on the internet didn't exist at that time, and, a bunch of us realized, well, I bet we could do it. The internet's fast enough now. And so we formed a little email list, a little nerdy email list of other video people, and we were actually coming up with ways to put video on the internet.
So this is you and Ryan and some other people formed this group?
Yeah, about 50 people or something from around.
About 50, 50 people?
Yeah, 50 people. Started out small. Like, I remember I started this email list, and then I just did a Google search for anyone on the internet that had ever tried to put video on. So try and put a video on a web page, and then I would email them and said, I'm building a group, let's come together, and let's figure out how we can do this. It started out with...
And what year is this?
It's 2004.
2004.
2004, okay.
So, it's 10 people, it's 20, it's, the word starts getting around, there's a couple hundred of us, and, and that group was for about, 5 years or so, pretty hot and heavy,
Yeah. And Ryan, you were in that group from the beginning.
Yeah, I was in there pretty early on. Jay started it early 2004. I was there like October.
Jay, the truth is you started this group to meet hot chicks.
Yay,
It worked.
It worked, yeah.
Right.
No, I had a friend that was working at a television station, a different television station, and he was like, you have to join this group. You have to see this. He said, you have to see this guy's videos. And I was like, okay. And it was Jay. And I remember showing my roommates at the time and being like, this is the guy I'm gonna marry. Like, no doubt, this is it.
So it was a pretty heady.
So he's starting this group to meet hot chicks. You're joining this group to meet hot guys.
Right, exactly.
And then once you're together, then obviously you moved on to other things.
Right. So Orion, we got an apartment together really quickly.
Yeah, it was kind of funny.
A couple months of meeting each other, we realized that, television wasn't dead, but television wasn't where we wanted to work in traditional TV. Yeah. So we actually moved to San Francisco and got into the tech world, a year.
And what year is this?
So that's 2006. And we lived,
and you've known each other for 2 years at this point.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were a couple pretty quickly out of the box.
Yeah, no, from the beginning.
We were a couple right away.
Yeah.
And so we were in San Francisco, working. And so at this point, we realized we didn't want to have traditional jobs, so we kind of formed a little company. So we were like consulting and doing freelance work, mainly working with tech companies who are working with video on the internet. And since we had kind of been a part of that beginning, we were a part of that kind of scene.
Yeah.
And, but then in 2008, we realized like we were just back into the same kind of, hamster wheel.
I mean, we were working for these like big corporate clients. Like we did some work with Google and you're like, this is amazing, but this is the same thing we were doing before. You're working for other people. Making,
right, details are different,
videos.
But it's same basic process.
Exactly.
Paying crazy rent in San Francisco and just, it just felt boring to us. And I think that's the thing, when Ryan and I got together, I think we were pretty honest with each other about what excited us. And when we got bored,
we had to.
Because, plus both of us have always been very frugal people. Like, neither of us wanted fancy cars or fancy clothes. So when we made money, we weren't spending it on that kind of stuff. We were saving it.
Well, I think part of us, like, I remember being in San Francisco and we started, like, meeting all these alternative people who were, like, down with paying rent. We gotta live in, like, villages together and, like, collectively, like, hippie world. And we were just, like, getting influenced by those people and also just thinking, like, we're not the people who we work for. We're not these people who are like, I want a fancy apartment in downtown San Francisco. I want this and that. We were just like, we don't want any of those things. Why do we even live in the city? Like that was kind of the next logical jump of what we wanted to do.
And where did that jump take you? Is that what took you back to Virginia?
Yes.
So my grandpa had like a little cabin, or house
outside of DC,
where we live now in the Shenandoah Valley, and it was empty because he had died. So we just thought, well, let's just go and kind of like just take a break and let's just go and live there. And we had saved up a bunch of money, and so we.
So you quit your jobs in San Francisco, moved back across the country, and out into rural Virginia.
Yep, and this is in 2008, so the economy's crashed, and
crashing.
Right.
And so,
did that have anything to do with your decision, or was that just happening in the background?
Part of it was like we could tell that something was happening because the housing prices in San Francisco were so insane. Like the worst house in the worst neighborhood was over $1 million, and we're like, this doesn't make any sense.
I will give ourselves a little bit of credit here. I think that we saw what was happening. I mean, we didn't do anything about it as far as investing, but we could just tell with our clients that everyone was getting nervous and just things just didn't feel right. So
we were just like, let's go.
Yeah. And so it was good. We really timed it well. It was kind of perfect.
And you had no idea what you were going to do for a living once you got there. You just said, let's do this. Let's get there. We'll figure the rest out.
Well, I mean, both of us have been kind of freelancing consulting up in, for the past couple of years. So we knew that in DC, we live about an hour and a half away, that we could do some kind of work probably
for nonprofits or
some kind of politic
And we had friends in DC just because of the internet, so we were like connecting with them, like, hey, hook us up with some people.
But basically, because we had an almost free place to live, and we had a savings account, we saved up, we knew we'd be okay for at least 12 months.
See, now this is really interesting to me, and it kind of brings up the crux of I guess why I want to have this conversation. So over on my blog, I write about investing in money, and my audience is made up of people who want to be financially independent. And they want to be financially independent, so either they don't have to work or they can go work at things that speak to their heart. I would think if you surveyed my audience, which I haven't done, but I've had a lot of contact with them, there's a progression. So you work really hard for a number of years. You save very aggressively for those number of years. You achieve FU money, which some people think of as being totally independent. My definition, FU money is not enough then you never have to work again, but it's enough that you can make bolder choices because you can go without working for a while. Yeah. And then you continue to work and save aggressively, and eventually you get to financial independence. And that's full freedom, and then you can do whatever the hell you want. What's intriguing about you guys is you're at this point now. You've worked for a while. You've developed some skills. You've decided you don't want to do it anymore. You move cross-country, but you don't have FU money, if I understand it correctly, and you're certainly not financially independent. Right. But you still want to have that freedom.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So the paradigm that I see unfolding for you guys, where the paradigm I just described is work, save, FU money, freedom, financial independence, more freedom. Your paradigm is more like work, screw this, freedom, alternative business.
Right.
and then also, of course, saving and developing FU money and ultimately financial independence.
Yeah.
Yes.
In which point you'll be able to do whatever the hell you want, which you're pretty much doing anyway. So you guys, as I think many of your listeners will already know, but maybe some of mine connecting to this from my site won't, make a lot of your money now with an eBay store, and more by investing in rental real estate. Wow. Why eBay? How did that idea come up, and how did that develop?
Right. So, I think that what you just said is very important. We didn't really know that there was a financial independent kind of group of people, so that's not really where we were coming from. We just know that we hated to work for other people. So I'm really impressed by people who can, stick to working a job for 10 years and save up all that. We just couldn't do it. We just couldn't stomach it. So it's like you said, we're kind of coming at it backwards. We want the freedom first.
Yeah.
And then we'll figure out how to keep that freedom. So
yeah.
One of them was...
I imagine there are a lot of people listening to this that aren't thinking of that as backwards.
Yeah.
Right.
So the first step was, like we've already talked about, we moved to a rural area where life is cheap.
Very cheap.
We were able to stay in my grandfather's place for a while, for about a year and a half. Pretty cheap. But we actually did have a nest egg. We had saved up about $70,000, and then we bought our own home. So,
in cash.
So we owned a home outright. And
you bought it for cash, because you couldn't get a mortgage?
Yes,
absolutely.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
Because
so you would have, had you been able to, you would have bought it with a mortgage.
Yes.
Probably, yeah.
We were trying.
Yeah.
But the economy had just tanked. We were first-time home buyers. We didn't have, we had a gap in income, freelance income, and every bank was like, no.
They didn't trust us.
Yeah.
So, and then once you're in a rural area, okay, it's great. It's cheap, all that, but there's no work. And so, and we were freelancing still, doing the video work, but it just wasn't enough, and we didn't like it. And this is where her background comes in from her family. Her family, they're used to being kind of
freelancers and
making things up. And
so
Ryan had the idea of we could just find stuff at thrift stores and sell it online. It sounded crazy to me. I just didn't.
But you know what? This was the thing. So we live in a rural area. There's lots of funky antiques and vintage clothes. And, when you live in New York and San Francisco, you can't find that stuff because everything's been found already and is in the, high-end boutiques or whatever. So in the country, you're just coming across all these crazy, amazing vintage clothes and items. And, we are from the city, so we see them. We're like, that's so cool. Let's sell that to someone in Brooklyn. So we did.
So that's interesting. So because you lived in the cities and you were working more traditionally and you were going to these shops that other people had.
Yeah.
And you're seeing this cool stuff and you were seeing the kinds of prices that were being asked.
Right.
And that kind of registered somewhere in your brain. And then suddenly you're in rural Virginia and you're seeing these same things out there for pennies.
Yep.
Exactly.
Right. And you, of course, as everybody knew about eBay, but you were just able to put all of this together and say, there's a business here.
And and I think I've always been good about our money, so we always knew how much money we needed to make every month.
Right.
And so it didn't matter how we made that. If we sold old shoes on the internet or did some freelancing, but we just needed to make that number every month. And so it just became more and more, we're just selling stuff on the internet. And it worked.
That's a great line you have, Jay, that in previous conversations, you said to me once, I never thought growing up and going to school and in my professional life that I would ultimately be making my living selling old shoes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, by the way, the other great line that you have, the U.S. is bleeding treasure. It's like finding $50 bills just lying on the ground. And that's a reference to what you, Ryan, were just saying.
Yep.
That, you saw this treasure in these high-priced vintage stores in the city, and then you move out to the country, and there it is, just kind of lying around.
Exactly.
So the thing that occurs to me is moving out into the country is geographic arbitrage, right?
Yep.
It's some of the readers of my blog do it by moving around internationally to countries where the cost of living is lower and
right.
what have you. But you've done it here in the U.S. by moving rural. You already mentioned that living in the rural part of the country is inexpensive. One of the reasons being the jobs are few and far between. You solve that problem by having a job you can do remotely. Mm-hmm. But how is rural life day to day? I'm a city guy too.
Yeah.
And there's a side of me there's a side of it that appeals to me because it's beautiful. But it occurs to me, in my head anyway, I think of rural, and the people already there as being kind of clannish.
Yep.
And maybe a little resistant or hostile to outsiders. How'd you find that? Have you been accepted in your community?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that show Justified? That's what it's like to live here.
I think I have, but I don't remember it all that clear.
Oh boy.
Anyway, it can be, it's clinch, where if you open up the phone book, there's 25,000 people in our county. And if you open up the phone book, there are certain names.
There's so many names.
Of the phone book.
Yeah.
And it's true. But at the same time, it's changing. I mean, there are more and more people it's retiring to the country.
Yep.
Because there's no work. Young people whose families have been here for generations are leaving and they don't come back. So those families is broken apart. So, we found that, as long as we showed that we were here to stay and we were willing just to get involved in what was going on, people are like, that's cool,
Yeah, I have found nothing, bad about it.
And, honestly, most of our life is the internet,
Yeah.
Like, all of our friends are on the internet for the most part.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question. So do you have friends who live in the community, or are they more just acquaintances that you say hi to and have friendly relations with?
We have friends. More and more we're finding that there are younger people coming, which is great because the younger people are realizing that they can't have the business that they want in New York or San Francisco or Boston, just like us. They're like, oh, I can buy a house and buy a building and run a business here, and I can't do that.
We probably have maybe 5 to 10 friends that are close to our age who live around here. And then a lot of our other friends are honestly a lot older. Like, we have a lot of friends who are like in their 70s,
Yeah.
And we like hang out with them.
These are friends who live in the same community.
Yeah.
And do they know what you do?
No,
No,
eBay
In
wise,
fact, they
no.
probably have to wonder, you're not getting up and
Yeah.
you're not getting up in the morning, getting in your car and driving to a job every day.
Right.
I mean, that's a great thing when, people who are not really tech savvy, you can just tell people I make money on the internet and they just kind of don't.
We're
ask
like,
any more
we do
questions.
tech work.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay.
And then they'll say,
Okay.
well, did you fix my computer?
I'm like, nope. Yeah.
I mean, plus one other thing. I mean, I think another reason why moving to a rural area works is because we have each other.
Yeah, that's a
Ultimately,
big part of it.
We're home buddies. We were home buddies when we lived on each coast.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, we were in San Francisco and there'd be these insane, like, cool parties happening and we'd be like, let's just watch a movie at home. It's like, why do we live in the city? You know?
Well, one of the interesting things to me, too, again, I live in the city.
Yeah.
And it does intrigue me living in a rural area, and I don't have to live in the city for purposes of making a living. But I would miss the restaurants and the ambiance of the city. But what you guys do, which is intriguing, is you live in the country, and when you start to miss those things, you do what?
take an
urban vacation.
Yep.
That's
Now,
right.
what's an urban vacation? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have an Amtrak. So we're on the East Coast, and there's an Amtrak station,
1 hour away.
an hour away. That
With free parking.
That we can park at, and we can be it's New York within 6 hours,
Yeah.
and Boston, it's within a day. We can go down to Florida. And so we just hop on a train. We rent an Airbnb for about a week or so, and just go and enjoy a city for exactly what it's for.
For the culture.
And then leave.
And how often do you do that? How many times a year?
Several times
2,
a year.
3 times a year.
Sometimes 4 times a year,
Yeah. We
And my guess is, I imagine when you do that, you do even more city things than you did when you were living
Yes.
in San Francisco, and it was
Oh,
always
yes.
easy to say, let's just watch the movie at home. We can always do this tomorrow.
Yes.
Like the last time we were in it's Manhattan, I went online just to see what there was to do, and we went to a magic show.
Oh my gosh. It was like a comedy magic
It was
show.
so much fun.
I never would have done that if I lived in New York. It was hilarious. It was so
It
fun.
was so touristy.
And well,
It was
sometimes
so
we'll
great.
see like 2 movies a day. We'll just walk around the city. It's
Yeah.
great. We're not like hustling and working and trying to make rent. It's like we get to enjoy the city. It's quite lovely.
Well, that's the other thing that is intriguing about this and about your geographic arbitrage is that when you're starting something entrepreneurial like you guys have, it's very useful to have your costs as low as possible.
Yes.
And if you were doing this in New York and paying those rents and the other high costs that are involved in living in a big city like that, that bar would be a lot higher and a lot tougher to get over.
Exactly.
But going out to where you are now and minimizing your expenses, you maximize your chance of success. And then the
Yes.
further over that bar you get, the more extra cash flow you have to begin building your wealth and to begin investing in houses, which we'll talk about in a second.
Right.
But let's go back to eBay for a second. What's a trash shelf?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
How did this name come about, Jay?
a friend and I, another guy that sells on eBay, he's out in LA. We were just online talking to each other.
Just joking around,
And
right?
He called himself or I called him a trash shelf because we like to brag to each other about the things both of us find, and sometimes we actually find it in the garbage. Things left on the side of the road or in dumpsters, and so I just like the idea of like these little elves out in America going around just picking up things of value that people are throwing away.
Yeah. So the name stuck. It was actually funny. Jay was just mentioning it on the podcast, and then people were very excited about it and started just calling themselves trash elves on the blog. It's really funny.
Back, this would be back in the 80s, I guess, when we were still living in Ohio, maybe into the 90s. We had a front porch on the house on a fairly busy street. So there was a lot of action. I used to like to sit out there and watch the action. And once a week, you could take whatever you didn't want out to the tree lawn and put it by the road for disposal. And the city trash collectors would come along and collect it. And trash elves, like yourselves, knew about this. And
Yep.
so it was always entertaining to sit there because the trash would go out the day before, the evening before, and the city would come the next morning and the trash elves would come in between. And I remember sitting there one time and this woman in a new Mercedes pulled up and got out and rummaged through what was sitting on the tree lawn and selected a few things and put them in her trunk and drove away. And my wife and I were kind of chuckling about this. And after we finished chuckling, I turned to her and I said, but it's worth noting, she's the one driving the Mercedes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that leads me up to my next question. How much can somebody realistically expect to make being a trash elf?
So, we started doing it, and it's never thinking it would be our full-time income, but we just realized it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
The more stuff we listed on eBay, the more money we could make. So it's all about a listing, finding and a listing. I mean, it's easy to go and find stuff. I mean, there's TV shows about it, Storage Wars and Pickers, and
yeah, there's so much stuff out there to find.
This country is just exploding with abundance and waste, so it's not hard to find the stuff. It's just
how exactly do you guys do it? I mean, do you go to those storage auctions? Do you have a route where you stop at the tree lawns before the trash collectors? I mean, how do you guys do it?
Sure. So there are group of thrift stores in our area that we definitely check out all the time. There are some auctions that we love to go to, in-person auctions where, a person dies.
It's like an estate auction.
And their estate is just being sold out. So, a man's life is sold in about 2 hours, and that's where we go and we get a carload of stuff for, $100. Flea markets. I love flea markets, mainly because it's such a social, it's Mad Max kind of experience. I love that,
But you have to have a really good eye, but I guess that comes from your experience looking at these stores and
it comes with experience. It comes with experience selling too. I mean, the great thing about a place like eBay is you can find something, put it online. If it sells, you're definitely going to get one of those again next time you see it. So that type of experience is quite quick in this world.
Yeah.
So it's like any other career or business. The more engaged with it you are and the longer you're engaged with it, the more you learn, the more tricks you pick up.
Exactly.
And so I'm sure your listeners would enjoy this because we like to talk about specific numbers. I would say in a conservative estimate, we probably make about $60,000 a year net. At
any given moment, how many items do you have up for sale on eBay?
5,000.
Yeah, we have 5,000 items on eBay, which now part of that is because we do live in a rural area, so storage buildings exist, on our property when we bought them, so we can store lots of stuff. Storage for rent is very cheap, so we can also do that if needed. It's not like the city where you just have your apartment and that's it. We can really stock up on inventory, and we call it the pipeline. We fill the pipeline with as much stuff as possible, and stuff will sell every day. And it's true, and it does.
And every day you're out acquiring new inventory.
No. Not every day.
Not every day, but every week or whatever.
Yes, yes.
Honestly, it's about balancing, not getting too much stuff.
Yeah.
It's so easy just to fill your house full of junk. I mean, it's always a balance between finding and listing and selling.
Well, how many square feet do you have devoted to inventory storage? Do you have a specific area in your house or a barn or something where you store this stuff?
We have several places.
It's like our front porch.
We have 3 storage buildings, an office.
I don't know.
Do you ever sell something and then have to say, now, where did I put that?
Yeah, yeah. But we find it. We always find it.
I think we're good about it. We have a good...
we have a pretty good system.
Yeah.
And when you travel, right?
Yeah.
So you've got 5,000 things listed. I've done a very little bit of selling on eBay myself. I mean, very little. But I've done enough to know that when something sells, the buyer wants it right away.
Yes.
So if you're playing in New York City, or if you're over in Europe, and I know you travel over to Europe every now and again, and you got 5,000 things for sale, how does that work?
So the assumption that you have is incorrect. So I know the assumption is...
It's like a lot of my assumptions, Jay.
I mean, we thought that too.
Yeah.
And so it's something we kind of figured out. I mean, people want things right away, Amazon, I want it today, you know?
Yeah.
But the thing is, the kind of stuff we sell is kind of older, weird, funky, vintage stuff. A lot of it's stuff it's one of a kind, or things that people have a hard time finding. So when they buy it from us, they're just happy they bought it, and they're willing to wait. So we just change our handling time, where we're very open, upfront, transparent. We'll say sometimes we've been away for six weeks at a time, and we say, and we always tell people we'll ship it when we get back. And 1 out of 10.
So do you actually say we are traveling from January 1st to February 15th, and we'll ship it on February 15th?
Yep.
It's, you know, exactly, it says it before they even buy. It says it when the estimated date is. And
but then we message them as well. And like Jay was saying, 1 out of 10 people will say, "Oh, I can't wait. It's for a present, whatever."
But 9 out of 10 people,
I mean,
will be like, okay, no problem.
90% of people are like, "No problem." Yeah. It's amazing.
So when you come back from your travels, you have
200 items that we have to ship.
You spend the next 3 weeks shipping stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
More like 3 days.
I mean, I spend 3 days straight shipping. When we were gone for 6 weeks.
And you pack everything yourself?
Yes, I do it all myself.
So do you buy commercial volumes of packing peanuts and boxes and stuff, or?
I mean, I do buy that stuff, but we do scavenge a lot of it, and I get a lot of it from the post office for free, because the post office provides priority mail boxes for free.
And we go to, it's Walmart, mainly in the evenings, and we just walk around the aisles, and there'll be a guy who's unloading stuff, and he'll have a big cart of boxes.
And we'll just ask him for them.
And he'll say, take them, and we'll just take home a big carload of boxes.
Just free, beautiful boxes to be used.
Tell me a little bit, and this might be a tougher question for you, but on eBay, who are your buyers? Do you have any sense of who these people are that actually buy the things you offer?
I mean, a lot of stuff we sell, because, you know, we have more of our store is, we sell everything. It's like,
just housewares, clothes, you know, rugs, lamps.
I've spent some time in your store. The range of things you offer is amazing.
We like to call
as by the way, are the prices.
Yeah.
You're not shy about how you price
it. I am not shy. But here's the beautiful thing about eBay. I can put a very high price on something, and I can give people the option to give me an offer. So if I'm way off and they're like, this is not worth that. But the great thing is, I've had things up for $500, $600 that I bought for, $5, and someone comes along and gives me a $300 offer. I'm like, that's great. I'll definitely take that.
Okay, so I know we're kind of getting away from my question, but let's go down this path a little bit. So if you put something up for $500, I would think that if I were looking at it and I said, I happen to know something about this item and these people are nuts. It's a $300 item at best. I'm probably not going to even make an offer because I'm going to say we're so far apart, but that's not your experience.
Oh no, people will give you lots of low offers.
I mean, I think the other thing too, to give ourselves some benefit here, is that we're pretty good at doing the
research. Yeah.
I mean, eBay has a huge history of sold items that you can search, and you can kind of see where the prices are and what things are worth. So.
Well, and that's your experience at work too, of course.
Yeah, that too.
But to go back to your original question, I think that people buying from us, there's a lot of collectors. I mean,
yes.
That's not us. We're minimal people. We don't like to keep anything. I'm not a collector. But there are a lot of collectors, They collect owls or Federal glass or, whatever.
Oriental rugs, vintage.
And that's a lot of the people that buy. Like, they like nicely made things, and that's what we like.
So do you have in your own home, I have this vision that you have sort of a constantly rotating, for your own use, constantly rotating rugs and pictures on the wall and lamps, and as you get stuff that you say, this is kind of interesting, and I'll put it up for sale, and I'll enjoy it in my home until it sells. Or is your home filled with a few things that you love and they're always the same?
Yeah, normally the stuff that we keep is the stuff that has some damage on it, so we don't think it would sell well. So we kind of keep a second tier kind of stuff. But for the most part, we don't really have anything special in our own home.
I mean, I would pretty much sell anything that's around here if I needed to, wanted to, or got sick of it. Like, if we don't use something, we're like, let's just put it back into the, stream and
we did have a piece of art on our wall, and it was on eBay, and we put up a really high price.
And someone
offered us that price, so we're willing to take it.
We were like, all right, I'll ship it to them.
And then you just put a different piece of art up, right?
Exactly. It's fun like that.
So going back to the pricing, because there was one more thing I noticed in poking around in your eBay store. Every now and again, I notice you, especially higher price things, I think, at least what I noticed, you will put something on sale. So there was, I forget what it was, but there was something I saw that you had listed at $2,000 or $199.99, and you dropped it down to $1,200.
Yeah.
And you point that out, it's, I forget exactly how you phrased it, but save $700 was part of it. Again, I look at that and I say, really, come on. I mean, you tried to get $2,000 for something that might be worth $1,200. I'm not saving $700 or $800. People respond to that?
Well, I know exactly which item you're talking about, and it's an item I've had for years because I can't sell it. And actually, I think we're going to keep it's a set of lamps, if I'm correct.
I think that sounds right. Because I also, and I might be confusing myself, they're a very unique set of green colored lamps.
Yeah, those are the ones.
Okay, because I noticed those in particular.
Yeah, they're beautiful, amazing Art Deco lamps. They're incredible. Right. I think we might keep them for our most recent property that we bought.
Yeah, they are striking, not my particular cup of tea, but
look,
they caught my eye, certainly. Yeah. But so do people respond to this discounting thing?
Not really. I mean,
no.
We honestly aren't big discount people, but we actually did happen to put on a big sale just because we wanted to try and move some stuff. It sometimes works.
It works sometimes.
But I think ultimately it's for us. People think eBay and they think auctions and they think if you put it up and it sells to whoever wants to buy it and then it's gone. It's different. We list it and forget it. We're about patience.
Yes.
We're willing to hold on to things for up to 4 years.
Yeah.
Waiting for the right person to come along to buy it. So.
Well, because you have 5,000 things for sale, and not only do you not have to sell them all at once, but you'd be overwhelmed if you did.
Yeah.
Sure, right. But also I think that we get, 2 to 3 times more per item, because we're willing to wait for the right person versus a seller that wants to try and get it out of their house within a week.
Yeah.
And they're just willing just to basically dump it. It's more like a yard sale where we're running more of like an antique store.
I do notice that occasionally you sell your things with an auction though.
There are some things, just to get technical about it, that we have on commission that we're selling for another person, which we do not like to do, but we are doing.
And those are what are in the auction?
Yeah, those are auctions.
So those are.
So you don't sell anything personally or for your personal store through the auction technique.
Yeah,
no, we don't.
Because, you're hoping that the right person comes along. It's within those 5 to 10 days of the auction.
Right.
And that's. You're really,
it's a small window.
A small window of people who are able to come. But if you just have it up, you're just waiting for the person that wants that rug and is willing to pay the price you want.
Another question that I have, and I've had this question in general for a long time. Everything you see offered for sale, not just on eBay, but in almost every retail environment, it's never a round number. It's never $10. It's $9.99.
Yeah.
That's a personal pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
I'm like, just make it $10.
Yeah.
I am always, in my head, I'm always putting it to $10. And sometimes when I'm engaged with a seller, even in retail stores, they'll say, how much is this? And they'll say $9.99. I say, okay, it's $10. And sometimes they're confused when I say that.
Yeah.
In any event, but I assume that because it's universally done, it must be effective, which amazes me because it's so ineffective with me.
Yeah.
But that's how you price things, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, I totally agree with you on that. Like, for us, we're all about just like, what's the reality of it here?
Yes.
I mean, essentially. But for some reason, when I was starting out doing eBay, it just made sense in my mind to do it. And it just was automatic. Like, well, we started selling stuff for $9.99 and $12.99. That's how much we were pricing things at. I would never sell anything that low, a majority of my stuff now, but for some reason it just made sense psychologically, and that's just stuck in my head, you know, $24.99. It's cheaper than $25, you know.
So you've never really researched this, but I look at it and say I'm sure that very clever marketers over decades have researched this and found it to be a powerful tool because it's so universal.
Yeah. It's bizarre.
I've actually read some papers about this where they've done tests. I mean, supposedly some experts say you should even price it even weirder. Like
yes.
$12.73. 86 cents.
People do it. People on eBay definitely do.
You know, I've frequently noticed that and wondered what the thinking was there, but there's actually research that suggests that's effective, huh?
Right, because the research says is that then a buyer thinks, well, if they're that specific, there must be a reason why they've chosen that. Like maybe that's just, you know, what the cost must be for this because it's so specific.
Yeah.
You know?
It's strange.
I don't know.
We don't think too hard about it. We think around how much we want to get for it, how much is it worth, and we go from there.
It'd be interesting to maybe do some experiments where we just
say $25.
Everything $25 and everything $10.
You know, I wouldn't do it because I think the experiments have probably already been done.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true.
So I want to move on and talk about the real estate side of your life and business. But before I do, is there anything about eBay that you want to add that I'm not smart enough to ask?
No, I think you covered it.
I think the only other thing is, what we do is not anything groundbreaking. You know, a lot of people sell online, sell on Amazon, sell on Etsy, so it's not a big deal. It's just, though, a lot of people like to think it's really easy, and we just gotta remind people, it's work. I mean,
it's not passive income. This is not a passive income.
We definitely put the hours in. It's just that we can choose when to put those hours in. So we could put like a whole week of work into putting stuff online, and then we can take off a couple weeks because we filled our pipeline and things are selling as we do other things. So.
And we get to do it at home with each other, with the cats.
Time shifting. Yeah.
And that's a great point. And it goes back to kind of that little hierarchy of work, save, a few money, et cetera, et cetera. You guys are not financially independent at this point. You are still actively working.
Right.
You've just created a way of working that allows a lot more freedom than trucking off to the factory or to the office.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's what intrigues me so much about, and what I think will intrigue my audience, this different way of thinking. You don't have to be financially independent to be free, although that certainly is a wonderful bit of freedom when you are.
Right.
You don't even have to have FU money to be free, although that's a great big step. But with a little creativity, you can structure a lot of freedom in your life, which is not to say that you're not working.
Right.
But most people who are financially independent, in my experience, still work because human beings love to be active and productive. They just work at stuff they enjoy.
Exactly.
You've started doing that without feeling the need to be financially independent first, which is kind of a cool thing. So my vision for you, and this is kind of a nice segue, my vision for you guys along those lines is that, you start out with this work, this screw this, run this alternative business, which is eBay. The alternative business becomes successful. It starts throwing off cash. And then you create a real estate business, which we're going to talk about in a second, that hopefully will throw off cash. And then from that point, maybe you go into things that are truly passive, like the index funds I talk about a lot at my site. And over time, you end up financially independent, maybe in about the same time frame of some of my readers who are doing it in the traditional working environment. So let's talk real estate.
Yeah. So
I think the house you live in is a good place to start because you already touched on it.
Right.
You moved to Virginia. You've got this nest egg of about $75,000. You can't get a mortgage because of the lifestyle you've chosen. So you put all the money, you find a house and you put all the money into it and you begin renovating it.
Yes.
Well, you take it over from there.
So, I mean, some of your readers might cringe when we say this, but we had that $70,000 was in its 401 and IRA account.
And I had index funds.
I
took it all out.
That we had saved up, and so we decided that a house was more important to us than this fund. So we cashed it all out, took the hit on the fee, but it was actually the year that Obama had
first-time home buyer's credit.
So actually it kind of canceled out the
fee,
the penalty.
That's true.
And so we had a house bought and paid for. And then we renovated it with profits from selling, old shoes on the internet. So
if I can interject just for a second,
mm-hmm.
One of the posts on my site that I am most famous for, it has gotten me the most hate.
Yep.
Oh, no.
And interestingly, the most love is the post that I wrote that's titled "Why Your House is a Terrible Investment."
Yes, I read that post.
Yeah, and as I say, it's gotten me the most hate of anything I've ever written, and significant amount of hate, and also the most love. Mm-hmm. And I think on both sides of that, most of the people expressing the hate and love are misguided, because I'm not saying never buy a house.
Right.
I'm saying don't buy into the real estate industry propaganda that it is always a sure bet, always the right thing to do for everybody, regardless of their situation.
Right, exactly.
I look at you guys and I see a couple of people who gave this very careful consideration, and given where you want to live and how you want to live, owning a house makes all the sense in the world. But you didn't enter into the house because somebody selling real estate said, "Oh, this is the best possible investment you could make."
Yeah.
Right.
Or because your Uncle George, drunk at Thanksgiving, said it.
Yeah.
Right. No,
Anyway,
we were not.
So you started renovating this house. It needed a lot of renovation.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
It was a foreclosure. The reason why we got it so cheap was because, it was a kind of foreclosure where there were holes in the wall and just,
bad.
Someone was unhappy when they left, and, so we had to kind of clean all that up. But also, basically, this is not a starter home. This is going to be our house.
Yeah.
I guess we can't predict the future, but this is kind of like our home base. I can imagine, I'm going to die in this house.
You sent me for the guest post that you did for me.
Uh-huh.
You sent me, I asked you for some pictures, and one of the pictures you sent, which I am going to use, is of a beautiful brick house. That's the home you live in, right?
No, that is the second home we bought to renovate as a rental.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we bought it for $70,000. We probably put in another, $70,000 to renovate it in the way that we wanted to live for the rest of our lives. So it has everything we want in it.
We gutted it.
Yeah.
We moved the plumbing, we redid the insulation, we redid the roof. We did everything to it.
And you did this over time with ongoing cash flow to come up with the 70,000.
2
Took
years
us
or
2
so,
years to do
and
it.
we paid for
How many years? I'm sorry, how many years?
2 years.
2
2 years. Okay. Well, that's not bad.
Yeah.
So you went from spending all the money you had to buy the house
Yeah.
to finishing it in 2 years and spending another 70,000?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, that speaks highly for your cash management.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing. When we started selling on eBay, we were actually generating quite the cash flow. And so that's how we now start talking about at real estate. This is when we started finding it's Mr. Money, a mustache, and probably all the people hearing this, all the financial independence people. We started realizing, people that make money, who are frugal like we are, they don't just go and spend it, they start saving it, or doing what we did. We decided to invest in local property, and so we bought so that's when we said, well, let's get a vacation house where we can rent it.
So we live in an area of the country where people come to go on vacation.
You're in the Shenandoah Valley.
Yeah, in the Shenandoah Valley, there's the Shenandoah National Park, the Shenandoah River. We live where there are caverns, and people come from lots of places to visit those. And so we saw people around us doing cabin rentals and vacation rentals, and there's a wedding industry happening in our county, and we're like, this is cool. This is interesting to us. We like redoing houses.
Yeah, that's the other thing. We had, redone our house. It's something we'd never done. It's before.
Yeah.
Now, do you do the work yourself?
No.
We do some of it, but we
Minimal.
definitely hire, we definitely hire real handy craftsmen who do what we say we want.
Yeah.
So you're not
No.
you're not
No.
putting up the drywall
I mean, we
put down the
helped.
tile yourself or whatever.
We helped with a lot. We did a lot of the cleanup. We did the design. No architect, no designers. That's us.
So basically, the two of us are our own contractors. So
Yeah.
we hire all our subcontractors, but we're in charge of what happens when and where.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So you hire electricians and plumbers and drywallers and
Yep.
carpenters and
Exactly.
okay.
And then the other thing is we build our scavenging into it. So we have like beautiful wood floors and
That we
mantelpieces.
scavenged.
And that stuff we just scavenge from Craigslist. We can find all this stuff. Appliances.
That's a
for
big thing.
pennies on the dollar.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got your house, your personal residence, bought, renovated, finished. It's as you said, you could happily live there for the rest of your life.
Yep.
But now you're bitten by the bug of houses. And so I assume let's talk about the first rental you bought. And I assume that's also was some rundown piece of crap that you had to turn around too, right?
Yeah.
Did you also pay cash for it?
No, so now we have equity in our house and we could actually get a mortgage. So we found this house, beautiful 1850s brick farmhouse, gorgeous.
That's the one I have the picture of.
Yes. And,
It is a gorgeous looking house.
it's a beautiful house. But it had been owned by people that just really didn't do anything since like the 60s or 70s to it. So we had to gut that house as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we realize that we enjoy doing that. I think that's the important thing with all this stuff. I mean, we can't do anything unless we have fun doing it. So we enjoy scavenging and selling things on eBay. We realize we enjoyed buying old houses and figuring out how to fix it up. And then we enjoyed being hospitality people.
Yeah.
So when we rent it, we love to meet people.
Well, you're renting it as an Airbnb, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Why an Airbnb as opposed to an annual rental? I assume, first of all, that there is more cash out of Airbnb.
Oh, absolutely. So much more.
But there's more reliability and less work out of an annual rental, I would guess. So,
But see, around here, for the kind of, like the size of house as we have, we'd be lucky to get $800 each a month.
I mean, max.
Whereas we can
that whole rural
Yeah,
living, no jobs
exactly.
syndrome.
Whereas, we can rent our house for up to $250 a night, doing it as a
Peak
vacation,
season, yeah.
a rental. So
That makes it kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, also like just that for us in the area we are, like the types of tenants you get are just the wear and tear on your house is just gonna be crazy. Although I guess you could argue that for renters, but the house is looking great so far.
And, I think too, because we just like the idea of owning several pieces of property that make us a lot of cash versus what I see other people doing it. They own a lot of property. Each one only makes them kind of a small piece.
But that being said, that this is not passive. This is not us sitting back having a year-long rental, a 2-year lease. It's like we are cleaning that thing every 2 days sometimes.
You yourselves physically go in and do the cleaning and
Yes, that's us.
you don't hire that out like you do with the electricians and carpenters.
No, not at the moment. We try to keep every penny of profit goes to us. So.
So going back to the same question I had about eBay when you're traveling, when you're gone for 6 weeks, if you're the one who has to clean up and turn around and welcome guests, how do you operate an Airbnb when you're in Europe for 6 weeks?
So the very lucky thing for us, this is something we do hire out. We have a very good friend who's also very interested in hospitality in our area. He runs the rental for us while we're away, and we pay him a percentage of the bookings.
Got it. And you trust this person implicitly.
We've trained him as to how we like the house cleaned, how we like to meet people, how we like to walk people around the property. And he loves it. I mean, he's really into the same stuff we are, so.
And so at some point when maybe you own more properties or you just want to spend less time, you might turn more and more over to this fella.
We could. I mean,
Yes, we could.
that's definitely kind of a long range plan is, when we get to the point where we want to be kind of more hands-off. Yeah, and start hiring stuff out. But at this point, we're still into like the sweat equity period. We actually, so we've had this, it's rental. It's done very well. It's for us. So we actually just bought a second one that we're...
Before we go on to the second one, Jay, so when did you buy this first one? How much did you pay for it? How long did it take to renovate? And what did that cost?
We bought it in 2009.
Jay's timeline is off. We bought it in 2011. It was September of 2011. We bought it for $150,000. They had it up for $175. We offered $150. They said yes. Which is great for us. And, it took us 3 years to renovate it.
And we spent about $75,000 on it.
And it was, so you weren't able to rent it for the first 3 years.
Right.
Yeah.
That was
tough. You had a lot of capital tied up for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah. But see, that's also because we were paying for the renovations out of pocket. And so it just took longer. I mean, we didn't have $75,000 up front. We would be like, all right, this month, we have to spend $10,000.
So if you'd had the cash, you could have turned around the renovations in much less than 3 years.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, plus we were kind of making it up as we went along, We didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have like a designer and an architect be like, this is the full plan. It's like, we're just like, we have to do this, we have to do this. Also because this is very like, the artists in us where we're like, we need to feel the space and see what's going to happen and what makes sense as we go along, which is not what a lot of people do. If you're flipping a house, you're not doing that,
right.
And it's the artist in you that allows you to do that design work. Who said that art majors and English majors couldn't prosper?
Right, exactly.
Right.
So we kind of learn that as we go.
Yeah.
So you have a second one too, right?
Yes.
Right. So
when did you acquire this one and for how much?
So we bought that about a month ago. We bought it.
Oh, this is brand new.
Yes,
Congratulations.
it's very new. Thank you.
We bought it about we bought it for $120,000, and we're going to probably put in. Right now, our guess is about $40,000 into it, and we would love to have it done much faster. We would love to have it done by June, but again, a lot of this depends on our cash flow.
Right.
Our cash flow is better now, but still, I mean, $40,000 is a lot of money.
So you're really bootstrapping these things.
Yeah. Oh, it's bootstrapping.
I mean, yeah. So, but that's why nothing's getting hired out. Like we're doing a lot of this work ourselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. What's the hardest part of owning in this rental? And you're going to Airbnb the second one too, right? So what's the hardest part of owning these things?
I think that for me, and Jay probably has a completely different answer. For me, it's just the stress of maintenance, of making sure that you are on top of things if something goes wrong. That is your responsibility. You do not have a management company dealing with that. It is you, and you need to delegate that to whoever needs to fix the problem, whether it's you or a plumber or an electrician or an HVAC guy.
Especially if it's your guest calling with a problem.
Exactly. And that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen.
That would be stressful for me.
Yeah, it's stressful.
I think the hardest thing is, so kind of like on eBay, our whole goal is to get as much profit as we can per item. Yeah. And it's the same way with our, it's rentals. We rent on the high end. So whereas people in our area are renting a cabin for it's $50 a night.
Less sometimes.
We're asking $250 per night. And so we're getting these high end of the customers, and they really expect a lot.
Yeah.
So we really are very detail oriented, everything has to be just right. And so that can be kind of nerve wracking. At this point, I mean, this is now where we're joining the financial independence crowd here. As we get the second one up and we have 2 rentals pumping out cash, we're now going to be paying off our mortgages, and then
as fast as we possibly can.
And I think we can get paid off in 5 years.
So are you done acquiring property at this point?
We don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe
but
not.
You want, it sounds like the focus is now going to shift to building equity and
I think the 2 of us are not empire builders, I don't think we have interest in that.
Yeah, that's a whole another interesting subject is the concept of enough.
Right.
And so many people, and I talk to a lot of them, people that I meet on the Chautauquas that we take people on, or who I meet through the blog, and they want to know if they have enough to retire. And
Right.
there's a lot of fear, and
Yeah.
maybe I ought to keep working just a little more, even though the numbers say you have enough. Maybe I ought to keep working just a little bit more. Maybe I want to have a little bigger lifestyle, and so it's critical to and probably good for the soul to recognize what enough looks like.
Right. Because I think it's for us, we just see like, if we got any bigger, then it starts becoming more complicated, and then it definitely is having to hire people. And then once you start hiring people, that's just a thing in itself. And
I mean,
And then you never get away from the work.
yeah.
right. I mean, we don't know the future. I mean, honestly, in my life, I never thought I would own 3 properties. No way. That's crazy. And so it's interesting because we try to do things that make sense for us. Like, we had so much fun running the rental this year that we were like, we want another one. I really did not think that would be the case. And so that's just, the future. I don't know what the future holds, but we do want to pay down debt.
Never
debt.
say never, as
Right.
the saying goes,
Paying
right?
down debt is a great feeling. Like, we were able to pay some down this year, and it was great.
Oh, absolutely. So, what's the worst horror story that you have for us out of these things?
For the rentals?
Actually, I was thinking for the rentals, but if you have a horror story on eBay, we're open to hearing that too.
Yeah, so I think that's a good thing. It's for us that we really don't have any horror stories.
Yeah.
I mean, a little things happen that I guess people could call horror stories. Like a bad customer that gets an item and they're real grumpy and they cause a lot of trouble. But it's for us. It's just like always looking at the big picture.
Right.
Just give the person a refund. We take a small hit, but we get it out of our minds. We sleep well, and it's done. We see so many people get involved in they can make these things become very big, and
right.
And then that paralyzes everything they do.
Now, Jay, I will say this: Jay is an expert at dealing with stressful situations and having the big picture. So that's why I love to run businesses with him, because there'll be things at the farmhouse that the doorknob was messed up one night, and so these people are like, we're not going to not lock the door. What are we going to do? And so, Jay and I kind of put our heads together. It's 9:00 at night. It's dark. And we're like, we just have to go buy a doorknob and replace it. And that's what we did, at first I'm freaking out. Oh, they're going to think we're bad hosts and they're not going to like the house. They, by the time they were done with their 4-night visit, they were in love with the house. They even left us a cash tip on the table and wrote us a long note. It was just your customers, as long as you're paying attention to them, communicating with them, solving the problem, they're like, great, no problem. And you're freaking out over it, and it's fine.
I in my business career, I even wrote an article about this. I would often say that when bad things happen, when mistakes happen with a customer, and nobody wants that, of course,
Right.
but it also represents a huge opportunity, because if you handle that mistake well, not only do you eliminate the problem, but you have the opportunity to create a much tighter bond with that customer. But your last comment there, Ryan, just gave me a great segue into the last thing I want to ask you guys. We've been going for well over an hour now. So let me wrap it up with this question. You mentioned that you like being in business with Jay, and I presume Jay feels the same way. So who does the most work? Who does the most work on eBay, and who does the most work on the real estate? And how do you share that work? Do you both do everything, or is there a division where, one of you does the listing and the photography and the other does the packing and the shipping, or fixing doorknobs or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
We definitely have, our labor is split up, and we both know what our roles are.
Right.
So in eBay, I photograph everything and write out what the item is.
Yeah.
And Ryan will list it on eBay, and then she packages it when it sells.
And ships it, yeah.
Yeah.
And how about the acquisition? Do you both
Yeah,
go
we
out
both.
acquiring inventory together?
Yeah, we both.
That's
buy
the
stuff.
fun part.
That's the easy, fun part that everyone wants to do.
And for the real estate?
So for real estate, I mean, as far as running the rental, I mean, we clean the house. I clean the top floor. Jay cleans the bottom floor. And, he does the outdoor maintenance stuff. And, I mean, we pretty much split it up. He does the laundry, actually. We've worked that out.
And then I'm kind of the a service rep
Yes.
because I like people.
He's
so,
very good at customer
so I handle,
service.
And Brian doesn't like people?
Oh no, it's not that. You know what? The great thing is Jay's very good at just like I was saying, being neutral and just like fixing the situation and communicating with people very quickly. He's very good at that. So we decided, okay, that's your job. You know, like I handle a lot of maintenance. Like the toilet was acting weird, it was running, and I fixed it. And that's my, expertise of like, fixing objects. So, we got, and he's the one that can like communicate to people, okay, it's fixed, everything's cool,
That's not unlike, my own marriage. I'm not the least bit handy, but my wife Jane is.
Yep. I think women are very good at that.
Yeah. And I think more of us men would be smarter to recognize it.
Yep.
Guys, this has been every bit as much fun as I hoped it would be. I appreciate your patience in answering all of my questions. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And
oh no, this is really fun, Jim. I'm so glad.
I hope the people listening enjoyed it as much fun listening to it as I did, certainly asking the questions.
And we'll be glad to answer any questions in the comments if people have any. But we hope we've kind of contributed some to the financial, independent world, because we really enjoy reading a lot of these blogs and really appreciate what people are doing. We just hope that we've kind of added a bit of a spin on it in a different way.
Yeah.
I think you absolutely have. And a lot of the people who read my blog and that I talk to who are working towards financial independence, some of them actually love their jobs. A lot of them don't particularly love their jobs, but they're okay. Yeah. But there is a small portion of them or a segment of the population who refer to their jobs as soul crushing. And I think especially for those kinds of folks, it's important to hear a story like yours and to realize that if you are in a situation that you find to be soul crushing, with a little bit of thought and creativity, there are alternatives. And it doesn't mean you have to go buy rental houses or even do eBay. But just knowing that somebody has done those things, and there are things like that can be done if you start looking around and are willing to expend a little energy and creativity, I think is an important message. So thank you for that.
Of course.
All right, guys, we'll wrap it up. Okay. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jim. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.